Grotesquerie is the latest series from Ryan Murphy, popularly known as the creator of shows like American Horror Story. Grotesquerie is a rare attempt of Murphy at a multi-season TV show instead of a miniseries or anthology format, and because of that, the finale for season 1 left a lot of fans confused. Today, I'm going to explain the story, the twist in the middle of the series, the hidden secrets in the finale that tells us a lot more than you might think, and of course, decode the esoteric and religious symbolism that Ryan Murphy is sending his messages through. Grotesquerie is a show about Detective Lois Tryon, the top murder detective in her smaller town's police department, who is known for solving cases better than anyone else around. The series opens with her suddenly being plagued by a mass serial killer who is testing Detective Lois in particular, and leaving behind the murdered bodies and gruesome depictions of religious imagery with cryptic clues, for which they begin to call the killer Grotesquerie. This starts with family homes filled with murdered victims and heads boiling in pots in episode 1, and escalates by the second episode to recreations of the Last Supper made with murdered homeless men and other societal outcasts. Along the way, Lois gets help from Sister Megan Duval, a Catholic nun who works for her church's newspaper, where they are known for detailing things that the mainstream church would find unsavory, such as these religious-themed murders in the town. Sister Megan becomes helpful in decoding different religious and apocalyptic symbolism found in the murders, and with her help, by the end of episode 7, Detective Lois is ready to pin this on the priest that Sister Megan is in love with, Father Charlie Mayhew. The final villain doesn't quite make sense to Lois, however, and she believes that it is actually Megan who committed the murders in order to drive up traffic to her articles and her church. This leads to Lois and Megan fighting each other, where Lois is stabbed near to death, but the last thing we see is her blowing off the head of Sister Megan. Following this, Lois suddenly wakes up in a hospital with everything she had experienced in the last 7 episodes being explained as just a very vivid dream she had while in a coma for 6 weeks. This was only episode 7 out of 10, with the next 3 episodes exploring what this new reality was, and how it differed from the dream world from the first 7 episodes. In the dream world, all of the key characters are the same. Lois has a daughter who is educated but obese, but in the dream world she wants to flaunt her eating issues on TV and is seen as something of a failure by her mother, whereas in the supposed real world she is actually even more of a success. In the dream world, Lois has a cheating husband who is in a coma, but in the waking world, it was actually her who was in the coma, with her husband trying to end her life there. Finally, in the dream world, Megan is just a random nun that Lois happens to meet through her job, but in the supposed real world, Megan is actually the chief of police in Lois's department. Lois is still the top detective there and was the chief herself for a while, but Megan managed to get the job, and it left the two with a sour dynamic, though Megan still has a respect for how good Lois is at solving cases and keeps trying to rope her in. In this world, the murders of Grotesquerie never took place, but as soon as Lois wakes up, someone begins to recreate them. This could be anyone apparently, as she does allow her dreams to be recorded and then passed around by a doctor studying dreams, but she maintains in the finale that it must be someone she knows committing the murders, someone who came into her hospital room and listened to her dreams while she was in a coma. The idea that Lois was in a dream for the entire first 7 episodes was something heavily foreshadowed in the show. Take a listen to this conversation between Lois and Megan in episode 4, for instance.
We're working hard. Cases get solved and sick people get better.
Most murders go unsolved, and a majority of people in hospitals usually die there.
Notice how Lois seems to be talking about her husband here, who is in a coma, and the murder cases that she was trying to solve when she says that murders get solved and people get better. Megan's reaction was to say that people don't get better and that they often die in hospitals. Already, the show is hinting at Lois herself being in the hospital, slowly dying in her comatose state, the mystery of how she really ended up there not being solved. In episode 6, Macy even claims to Lois that she could just be in a dream, with Macy just being a symbol in the dream like everything else.
What makes you imagine this is not all just some glorious dream you were having? We might be just some kind of a vision.
The big twist in the finale, however, wasn't that this was just a dream scenario being recreated, but rather that Lois is actually trapped in an endless loop. In episode 10, in her conversations with the doctor, Lois claims that she thinks she never woke up from her coma, that she's still in a dreamlike state, or rather a hell-like state, where she is being tortured even by the people who are acting nice to her in an endless circle, she says.
I am still in a coma, stuck in an endless circle.
This endless circle is proven to be true at the end of the episode. Already, the murders from her dream were being recreated, with Chief Megan having to find the crime scene of the dead family at the dinner table with the boiling pot. After that, in episode 10, we get a recreation of the Last Supper murder from Lois's dream. It has obvious differences, but to emphasize that Lois really is trapped in an endless circle, take a look at the two scenes side by side. Both start with the exact same shot of this man taking his hat off, with the shots that follow also being the same. There is suddenly a split where they begin to have different scenes overall, but the similarities are still there. In both cases, we get identical shots of Lois and Megan sitting in the pews, with Megan always sitting behind Lois and draping herself over the pew in front of her. Both murders are based on the Last Supper, and Lois says eerily similar things about both of the murder victims playing Jesus. In the original Last Supper murder from episode 2, the Jesus figure is a homeless man who Lois has interacted with earlier. Here, she says that the Jesus figure had touched her heart, this time meaning figuratively. In episode 10, the Jesus figure is Charlie Mayhew, the murdering priest from her coma dream, who in this supposedly real world is the doctor who operated on Lois, performing heart surgery on her when she fell into her coma. Here, Lois says that he literally touched her heart. Take a listen to those clips back to back.
The Jesus figure, he touched me. My heart.
He moved you?
He literally touched my heart with defibrillator paddles. I knew the Jesus figure. He touched me. My heart.
So after this, the big question is, why is Lois trapped in an endless circle? Well, in addition to this, Lois describes herself as being trapped in hell, or a hell-like state. You could argue she is in something of a purgatory, but she is being tormented by demons or perhaps guided by angels depending on how you look at it, both trying to lead her to certain conclusions about either getting better or succumbing to her vices. Episode 2 opened with Detective Lois smoking and drinking, claiming that no one in history has ever convinced someone else to give up their vices, hinting at the idea that she is trapped in something of an afterlife or a state between life and death where they are trying to convince her to let go of her sins in order for her to ascend higher. In this state between life and death, she has to properly solve symbolic crimes, all hinting at a real life she lived but with different distortions in each loop. Sometime in Season 2, the loop would likely start over again, with us exploring a third reality that is once again different, but also giving us clues about the real life that Lois lived. This can't end until she either succumbs to her vices and reaches some sort of final death in this hell, or she breaks the loop and solves the mystery, saving herself and perhaps the other souls trapped there. This is an important part of the Jesus Christ tradition, where his death on the cross and descent into the afterlife is seen as part of a plan to rescue the souls that are trapped there. The show, of course, has a heavy focus on Christianity, particularly Catholicism. The murders are not just religiously themed, but the world that Lois lives in is portrayed as falling apart on an apocalyptic level. Alongside this, Christianity is presented as a decaying system. In the West, Christianity as a practice is actually on the decline, and in the show, this is mirrored by the practice itself becoming corrupt, attracting sexual deviants intent on changing the system, and psychopaths who are willing to do anything to make themselves feel special within it. In episode 4, Father Charlie has a conversation with Sister Megan where he discusses the need to completely reinterpret the scripture based on new findings, and the desire to do away with all the rules that stand between Charles and his pleasure. Father Charlie makes the argument that if Jesus is able to forgive all sins, then there is no point in trying to hold back on sinful desires, such as Charlie and Megan sleeping with each other. This episode begins the crazy descent into hell with Lois's dream, where Lois and Megan begin their journey to a town that is surrounded by fire mixed with copper, creating a hell-like red smoke. Here, Megan insists that her sins and the sins of the world have opened up a portal to hell and that they are all being punished. Megan describes hell as a world without God, with a strong emphasis in the show that this is a world where people assert themselves as God. To emphasize this, Lois herself makes an argument against the people worshipping Jesus with a different skin tone than their own, saying that she believes your God should look like you, hinting at the world falling apart because of people beginning to worship themselves and their own image. This was the sin of the pagan religions in the view of monotheism, people who claim to worship gods but whose gods were embodiments of their patriarchs and their tribal histories. Judaism and later Christianity was seen as a solution to this. As while the Old Testament God is accused of also acting like a tribal history metaphor, there is a clear distinction between the Old Testament God as an entity and his own people who he is trying to guide. When Lois talks about worshipping a god only if they look like you, she hints at the worship of the self that led to idolatry, images of men claimed to be supreme rulers of the universe. This is a world where people believe that they are the ones in control of their own destinies, and in a way that is true for Lois. She is in hell, as she says, but in her coma world, she has crafted a scenario where everyone else is the problem, and she is the ultimate victim who ends up getting her way in the end, different from the jarring second dimension she can't handle the supposed truth of. The point, ultimately, is that without God, we devolve into self-worship, chasing vices and insisting that we are the ones in control of the universe, leading to a life that resembles hell, but a hell of our own making. In the show, everything Lois says seems to even have an effect on the reality around her, such as her saying that people get better and murders get solved, leading to her coming out of the coma after solving the murder. And episode 10 has her saying she is in that endless circle, before having the Last Supper murder scene start with the exact same footage as in her coma. Lois appears to be in a world that God has left behind, as she says, but that means she is the most powerful entity there. But without God, she is just trapped in her own flaws and vices. Of course, there is also the apocalyptic themes layered into the show, hinting not just at the death of Lois, but at the death of everyone, something very few can escape according to the mysterious man at the burning town in her coma, who was later explained to be her departed father. Christianity is, interestingly, a religion that could be said to prophesy its own end. In the book of Revelation, it is explained that in the end times, the world will begin to worship an entity known as the Beast, sometimes referred to as the first beast to distinguish it from another beast that is important later. Here, it is explained that most of the world will worship the beast, and when enough people have taken the mark of the beast willingly, it will become a crime not to worship him. Revelation says the whole world will worship the beast except for those whose names are found in the Book of Life, referring to those who praise the Christian truths. These few who do not worship the beast will be put to death, which would seemingly put an end to the entire Christian tradition. Those who stay with their faith are said to receive blessings in death, and eventually a resurrection in the more peaceful world to come, ruled by Christ in the New Jerusalem. These souls who do not get the mark of the beast or succumb to sin in their lifetime are presented as being martyred similar to Jesus, dying in the name of the true religion, and like Jesus, after their death they experience a resurrection. Embedded within its more overt religious commentary is also the hints of something behind the curtain, so to speak. This started in the coma world, where Lois dreams of the religious institutions being the ultimate evil, but once she enters the supposed real world, the focus moves over to men in particular. The primary focus of this world is not Father Charlie or Dr. Charlie, but rather Lois's husband, Marshall. Marshall had an affair that was exposed publicly, and he feels it's part of a pattern of a changing world to put down men like him. Just before Marshall is informed of a claim of sexual misconduct against him, with a student he assures us was consenting, he is lecturing in his class about the fall of the Roman Empire, something that has become increasingly associated with conservative men's culture. While Christianity did not begin in Rome, Catholicism in particular became closely associated with Rome for the capital of its tradition. In Judaism, Rome itself is used to represent or refer to the Christian tradition as a whole, at least as far as it spread to the West, with much of the apocalyptic prophecy explored in texts like the Kabbalistic Zohar being about the eventual destruction of Rome in particular. In the finale, Marshall rants aggressively about the eventual fall of Rome, equating it with the current age of America and insisting that, like Rome, our society will fall because of its sins. Immediately after this, the detectives inform him that a woman has filed sexual misconduct charges against him, meaning his own personal Roman empire that he has built up, his own life, is now about to fall because of his sins. Despite foreshadowing his own fall, Marshall falls deeper into the ideas of traditionalism, and is quickly welcomed into a strange group known as the Mexicali's Men Club. Here, we can begin to understand that in this second version of the same endless circle that Lois is trapped in, the focus is not on religion, but more so on the men behind their religions and what they are really after. Marshall is a man who wants power and status, and with that, he thinks that he deserves certain freedom sexually, to have his wife or even two wives, but still be free to explore and have his needs met on the side, because he feels he is just that important. This secret society has no cryptic name, just being called the Mexicali Men's Club, but it is an obvious parallel to the male-based traditions from history that were said to control the world and that still exist in some forms today. We saw a bit of this in Season 1 with the church itself, which does have female orders for their women, such as with the nuns, but which holds its power and influence in the priestly orders for men. The Mexicali Men's Club more so resembles the Freemasons, or any other mystery school that has existed since way back in ancient Egypt, and there are more hints about this in the show. In the earliest mystery schools of ancient Egypt, men could be initiated into the secret ceremonies of the upper classes, composed mostly of royals, titans of industry such as architecture, and the priestly class. In these ceremonies, the initiate would play the role of Osiris, who was said to be tricked by his brother Set into going into a beautiful chest, with Set promising the chest as a gift to whichever god could fit within it. This was a trap to capture Osiris and drown him in a river, after which Set would dismember the body and tear him into 14 pieces. Following this, Osiris would be put together again by his wife Isis, who would resurrect him for just long enough to impregnate her. This leads to the birth of Horus, who is able to defeat Set and banish him to the desert. This leads to Horus being something of a resurrection of Osiris, whose birth leads to Osiris himself having a spiritual raising in the afterlife, where he becomes the god of the underworld. This tradition had been adapted by secret societies for thousands of years since Egypt, with each different culture just changing the characters to a local mythological figure, but there is always a death and a resurrection, a fall and a rise. In Greece, they had several versions of this, with the story of Persephone falling into Hades and later being rescued by her father Zeus. Another mystery school had the son of Zeus, Dionysus, being torn apart by the Titans, who Zeus then kills with lightning. The ash from the Titan's body and the blood from his son creates humans, who need to purify themselves in order to let go of their Titan aspects and ascend to become the complete Dionysus again up above in Olympus. All of these, you'll notice, deal with a death and resurrection, which is a big theme in Christianity, of course, and as a result in Grotesquerie, where Lois is just experiencing death and resurrection in an endless circle. The show hints at this even more with its inclusion of the mysterious puzzle box that Lois gives her daughter to solve. As she explains, it's not one simple set of rules that help you solve the puzzle box, but rather it's a toy that teaches you how to solve it as you play it. This is a metaphor for the show itself, which teaches you how to solve it as you get more of these clues. But in the coma dream, it's an actual clue for Lois that she can solve the mysteries being presented to her if she lets them teach her. When she gets out of the coma world, her dreams are referenced by her and her doctor as pieces to a puzzle, and it's believed that she can use them to help solve the mystery of the new Grotesquerie killer that is copying her dreams. All of this is meant to mirror the mystery schools, who present their complex puzzles as solvable mythological mysteries that the initiate acts out, with each degree teaching you how to prepare for the next step of initiation. The show itself is thus a mystery school, something meant to initiate the audience with a series of ceremonial reenactments that all follow the same story of death and resurrection, something meant to teach you how to think esoterically and to help you understand the very religious and mythological symbolism in the show. As of now, there is no way to tell exactly what will happen next in the show, but there is perhaps a hint about the ending. Listen here to a scene from the finale where Lois and the doctor talk about her dreams.
A hard time accepting that I'm back in any kind of literal reality. It's the last piece of the jigsaw puzzle.
Piece right in the center, connected to everything else.
That's the middle piece. Goes in the center.
While discussing the dreams, they emphasize the idea that there's a piece of the puzzle right in the middle of it all, right in the center, as if hiding in plain sight that seems to connect everything. If you take that literally and go back to the middle of the season, which is episode 5, and look at the middle of the episode, we see a scene of not Lois or even her husband ending up in a hospital, but of Sister Megan herself. In the second dimension in particular, there's a strong focus on Lois going out of her way to help and save her as a fellow officer, even shooting her abusive boyfriend to protect Megan. A lot of this hints at the real person in danger perhaps not being Lois, but instead, that person she's actually in her coma to save is none other than Megan. But for now, this is still just a mystery. Hopefully this video helps you piece together some of the clues hidden in Grotesquerie, and if you like shows like this, consider watching the Netflix series The OA, as a lot of what Ryan Murphy does in Grotesquerie seems almost directly inspired by The OA with a very similar structure. Once you watch the show, we have videos here on the channel breaking it down, as well as breakdowns of other esoteric media like Outer Range and the Prometheus film from the Alien franchise. Check them out, subscribe, let me know what else I should break down, and I'll see you guys next time.